I have to save her. No time for rules. Hang on, sweetie.
Elena Ramirez had only been working at the Whitaker estate for a handful of days, but she already knew the place like the back of her hand, or at least the parts she was allowed to touch. Tucked away in the rolling hills of Bel Air, Los Angeles, the sprawling mansion was a monument to wealth. Marble floors that echoed underfoot, crystal chandeliers that caught the California sun like diamonds, and walls lined with art that could fund a small country. It was the kind of home where the air smelled of polished wood and faint lavender, and where silence wasn't just golden, it was enforced. But on that fateful morning, as Elena carried a tray of fresh orange juice and toast up the grand staircase, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Little did she know, her quiet routine was about to shatter, forcing her to make a choice that would upend lives and spark debates across dinner tables nationwide. Elena wasn't the type to draw attention. At 42, with calloused hands from years of cleaning homes in South LA, she moved through the world with a quiet determination. Her uniform was starched, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes sharp and observant missed nothing. The Whitakers had hired her through an agency, barely glancing at her resume. Thomas Whitaker, the tech mogul who built his fortune on software that powered half the Fortune 500 companies, didn't mingle with the help. He was a man in his late 50s, tall and impeccably dressed, with a jawline that spoke of old money and a gaze that dismissed anyone not on his payroll's upper echelons. His world was one of boardrooms in Silicon Valley, private jets to New York, and a schedule that left no room for the ordinary messiness of life. Then there was little Sophie, Thomas's 8-year-old daughter, a fragile wisp of a girl battling sickle cell anemia condition that turned her blood into a battlefield, causing excruciating pain crises without warning. Sophie spent most days in her sunlit playroom on the second floor, surrounded by toys she barely touched and books she read with wide, weary eyes. The staff chefs, gardeners, and a rotating cast of nannies kept their distance, following protocols that prioritized efficiency over empathy. Medications were administered on schedule, rooms dusted to perfection, but no one lingered to ask how she felt. Elena, however, couldn't help but notice. On her second day, she'd caught Sophie shuffling down the hall, her small frame hunched, a sweater draped over shoulders too thin for a child her age. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between thema recognition of shared struggle, perhaps, from a woman who'd raised her own kids through hard times in a cramped apartment. Down in the servants' quarters, the gossip flowed like cheap coffee. "She won't last," muttered Gladys, the head housekeeper, folding linens with practiced snaps. "Too nosy, that one. Asks too many questions about the girl." Her companion, Martha, nodded, her voice low. "Mr. Whitaker doesn't like the help getting attached. Remember the last one? Fired for overstepping. This place is for working, not mothering." Elena overheard it all as she passed by with a load of laundry, her face impassive. She knew her place, or at least, she thought she did. But the whispers gnawed at her, reminding her of the invisible lines drawn between the haves and have-nots in a city like LA, where dreams crashed against reality every day. The tension built slowly, like storm clouds gathering over the Pacific. Elena's routine was predictable: wake at dawn, prepare breakfast, clean the endless rooms. But she found herself lingering near Sophie's door more often, listening for the soft sounds of distress. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting the mansion in a golden haze, Elena was polishing the banister when she heard a faint whimper. Peeking in, she saw Sophie curled on the floor, clutching her stomach, her face pale and slick with sweat. "It hurts," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. Elena knelt beside her, not speaking, just offering a steady presence. It was a small act, but in a house where affection was rationed like water in a drought, it meant everything. Sophie looked up, her eyes trusting for the first time. From that point, Elena's concern deepened. Why did the on-call nurse clock out early? Why was the emergency line always busy? And why, in a home worth millions, did no one seem to care enough to check? The crisis hit on a Tuesday morning, the kind of LA day where the smog hung low and the traffic on the 405 freeway buzzed like angry bees in the distance. Thomas had jetted off to a conference in Seattle at first light, leaving without a word to anyone. The mansion felt emptier than usual, the staff absorbed in their tasks prepping for a gala fundraiser that weekend, ironing tablecloths and arranging floral displays. Sophie hadn't appeared for her usual mid-morning snack. Elena paused outside her room, tray in hand, and knocked. Silence. She pushed the door open, and her heart plummeted. Sophie lay sprawled on the bed, her body twisted in agony, breaths coming in shallow gasps. Sweat soaked her pajamas, and her skin had taken on a grayish tint. The room reeked of fear and illness, the sharp tang of crisis. Elena's mind raced. She pressed the emergency buzzer by the bed. Nothing. Dashing to the hall phone, she dialed the nurse. Voicemail. Thomas's cell. Straight to messages, his phone likely off during meetings. She tried again, her fingers fumbling, but the line went dead. Panic clawed at her throat. Bursting into the kitchen, she confronted the staff. Sophie's in trouble. We need to get her to a hospital now. The chef glanced up from chopping vegetables. Call the manager. That's protocol. Gladys crossed her arms. We don't just rush off. Mr. Whitaker has systems in place. Systems? Elena's blood boiled. In that moment, the divide between them crystallized the comfort of rules versus the urgency of life. She spun on her heel, racing back upstairs. Sophie was fading, her eyelids fluttering. Elena's eyes landed on the end of the hall. Thomas's private study, locked and alarmed, a fortress within a fortress. She'd never entered it, but she dusted nearby enough to spot the spare key hidden in the utility closet downstairs, labeled emergency only. Grabbing it, she sprinted back, her heart pounding like a drum. The door clicked open to reveal a sanctum of leather-bound books, glowing screens, and a sleek desk. On it sat the keys to Thomas's prized Range Rover and a money clip bulging with hundreds petty cash for a man like him, but a fortune to her. Hesitation flickered, but Sophie's labored breathing echoed in her mind. Elena scooped the girl into her arms, her slight weight a heartbreaking burden, and bolted down the stairs. The front door loomed. She pushed through, alarms wailing behind her like sirens of betrayal. In the garage, the Rover roared to life. She buckled Sophie in, whispering, "Hang on, sweetie. Just hang on." Tires screeched as they peeled out of the driveway, the gates clanging shut too late. The drive was a blur of honking horns and red lights ignored, the Hollywood Hills whipping by in a haze. Elena's knuckles whitened on the wheel, her mind flashing to her own children how she'd do anything for them. Behind her, unbeknownst to her, security had mobilized. Cameras had captured everything. Black sedans were already in pursuit, radios crackling with orders. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Elena screeched to a halt in the ER bay, leaping out and cradling Sophie as she burst through the doors. "Help! She's having a crisis sickle cell. Please!" Nurses swarmed, wheeling Sophie away on a gurney amid shouts of medical jargon. Elena collapsed against the wall, adrenaline crashing. Then, tires squealed outside. Security flanked her, cuffs clicking before she could protest. "You're under arrest for theft and unauthorized access," one barked. A doctor nearby frowned. "She just saved that kid's life. But protocol one for now." Thomas Whitaker touched down in LA just as the call came through. His face, usually a mask of composure, cracked as he rushed to the hospital. The head of security met him in the lobby. "We've got her in custody. Recovered the vehicle and cash." Thomas nodded curtly, striding to the ICU. Dr. Harlan, a seasoned physician with graying temples, pulled him aside. "Mr. Whitaker, your daughter was minutes from organ failure. If that woman hadn't acted." He trailed off, his tone accusatory. "Your staff failed her. Phone's off. Delace, it's a miracle she's stable." Thomas froze, the weight of his absence slamming home. He'd built an empire on efficiency, yet it had nearly cost him his only child. Guilt twisted like a knife. In the holding room, Elena sat cuffed, staring at the wall, her mind replaying the day's chaos. The door opened. Thomas entered alone. Their eyes locked as filled with a mix of fury and awe, hers defiant yet weary. Without a word, he unlocked the cuffs. "She's asking for you," he said softly. The walk to Sophie's room was tense, the hospital's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Sophie lay pale but alert, and Ford dripping steadily. Seeing Elena, her face brightened. "You came," she whispered, reaching out. Elena took her hand, tears welling. Thomas watched from the doorway, the scene a stark reminder of his emotional detachment. As night fell over the city, with palm trees silhouetted against the skyline, change brewed. By dawn, rumors spread online. Hispanic Maid steals mogul's SUV in apparent kidnapping. Social media erupted, debates raging about class, race, and desperation. Was she a thief or a hero? Comment sections filled with vitriol, typical entitlement from the help and support. She did what any mother would. Thomas couldn't ignore it. That afternoon, he called a press conference on the mansion's manicured lawn, cameras flashing under the relentless LA sun. Elena stood beside him, no longer in uniform but a simple blouse and slacks, her posture straight despite the whirlwind. "Yesterday, my daughter almost died," Thomas began, his voice steady but edged with emotion. "And the only person who saved her was Elena Ramirez. She broke rules, but those rules were flawed. No one else moved fast enough. She did." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Effective today, Elena isn't just staff. She's family. I've established a foundation for pediatric care in underserved communities, and she'll lead it." With a trust in her name. Elena's eyes widened. The reporters exploded with questions. It was a bombshell, challenging the status quo and igniting discussions on inequality. In the weeks that followed, Sophie mended, her laughter echoing through the once sterile halls. Elena transitioned seamlessly, her new role allowing her to advocate for families like her own. The staff whispered in awe, the power dynamic shifted. Thomas, humbled, spent more time at home, rebuilding bonds he'd neglected. Elena's act had exposed the cracks in a gilded life, proving that heroism often comes from the overlooked. Years later, the story lingered in American lore, a tale of courage amid division. Elena Ramirez, once just a maid, became a symbol of defiance against injustice, reminding us that true change starts with one bold step. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below, especially on themes of violence and injustice in everyday life. Do you believe Elena's actions were justified, or should she have followed protocol? Take a stand and let us know your perspective. You'd love to hear from you.